Good evening, everyone. My name is Scout Cardillo. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a junior here at the McCourt School, as well as the College of Arts and Sciences.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm a senior at Georgetown, and my pronouns are she, her. So with geopolitics, this is exciting for me because I've been a campaign boot camp participant and leader in the pre-orientation program, as well as a member of the student strategy team for Congresswoman Val Demings. I joined the Free DC campaign student chapter when it began in January because I see our college campuses as a critical pillar in advocating for justice and autonomy in DC.
And I was one of the lead coordinators behind the Georgetown Free DC student chapter, including the citywide student walkout that we held yesterday, where over 1,000 students walked out of classes across 4 DC schools. And we believe that, yes. And we believe that united as students, we can make a difference in our broader community's campaign for freedom and statehood.
We are so excited to introduce this panel tonight, co-sponsored by the Georgetown Institute of Politics and Public Service, as well as the Evidence for Justice Lab at McCourt.
Our first panelist is Kaya Chatterjee, is the Executive Director of Free DC, a community organization representing the interests of the DC community and dedicated to protecting home rule in the district.
Our next panelist, Councilmember Charles Allen, served as chair of the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety for 3 council periods. He currently serves as Ward 6 Council, which includes our Capitol campus here.
Based in Charlottesville, Virginia, Jamal Bowie is a columnist for the New York Times. He covers history and politics. This semester, he is serving as a GU Politics Fellow.
Chief Stephen A. Sund is a 30-year law enforcement leader and nationally recognized expert in crisis response, incident commands, and national special security events. He served as chief of the U.S. Capitol Police and spent over 25 years with the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C.
Our moderator for tonight's event is Andrea Headley. Andrea serves as the director for the Evidence for Justice Lab, as well as the associate professor of public policy here at McCourt.
All right.
One more thing, you can join this conversation on our social media channels at GeoPolitics. So please join me in welcoming our panel.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. A special thank you to all of our panelists for sharing time and space with us today. As Scout and Emily both have said, we have a diverse array of panelists today that will offer different perspectives on the issues that are facing our local community, but also the country worldwide. We today intentionally planned this event because today it marks the supposed end of the crime emergency that was declared on August 11th in the District of Columbia. With the declared crime emergency, what we have seen thus far was a federal takeover of the Metropolitan Police Department. We have seen a federal investigation into the crime statistics of the Metropolitan Police Department, and we've also seen troops deployed throughout the city to assist the Metropolitan Police Department's activities. Over the last 30 days, there have been lots of things that have been happening. On one hand, we've seen the federal office and the president say that the crime has been down in the district. We've seen over 2,000 arrests that have been made. We've seen over 50 homeless encampments cleared, and stated at least statistics that estimate about 200 guns were taken off of the DC streets. With that being said, we've also seen Mayor Bowser come out and with an executive order suggesting that, or requiring that local agencies have to cooperate with the federal government going forward. On the other end, we've seen community protests and community outcry declaring or requesting and requiring an end to what is claimed to be a military occupation and a takeover of the district. We've seen council members speak out against the mayor's cooperation. We've also seen the Attorney General suing the federal government for what has been stated to be illegal with regards to the national deployment. And so there's clearly a lot of things that have been happening in the district that is affecting our community. There's also proposals currently in Congress for the crime emergency to extend, both in terms of 6 months and also geographically. So there's talks around it extending to or expanding to places all across the country, including Chicago, New Orleans, Oakland, Baltimore, right? And so what's happening in our backyard may have started with us, but it may not necessarily end with us. And so we hope that tonight's discussion will be able to offer different perspectives, both retrospectively of what's happening, but also looking forward. And so with all of that context in mind, the first question for this evening is going to focus specifically on the public safety backdrop of all of the events. And so I'm gonna turn it first to Stephen, because Stephen has a long career in public safety. He's worked with the Metropolitan Police Department for over 25 years and also served as the Chief of Police for the U.S. Capitol Police most recently. And so Stephen, given what has happened in the district over the last 30 days, what are your reflections and what are the implications that it has both locally and nationwide?
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and I applaud you for having such a diverse panel. I really appreciate the fact that you have somebody from law enforcement to speak about this case. And before I answer the question, if it's okay, I'd just like to real quickly acknowledge the tragic shooting we had at Utah Valley University just a couple hours ago. Violence like that is unacceptable. As a country, we're better than that. Sitting down like this and having conversations is a much better way of handling things. So anyway, thank you for having me on. 25 years. This is not the first time we've done initiatives like this in the District of Columbia. I came on in the early 1990s. We had some pretty high homicide rates then, 400, almost reaching 500. There was times that we brought in National Guard and federal support, Safe Streets initiative. During some of the summer crime initiatives, we'd bring in National Guard. But it's not unusual for your local law enforcement to work with FBI to go after the most violent recidivists, ATF to be able to track guns, DEA to be able to track the drugs. So it's something that's happened before. This one's just unusual because you have the president invoking Clause 740 of the Home Rule Act. When I talk to law enforcement, it's a big assistance having them in, having them all coordinated as a team. It's been very beneficial. DC police are about 800 officers short, and it helps them get to where they need to patrol in the higher crime areas. You see the National Guard they're being put into some of the tourist areas, Union Station, Georgetown area, waterfront, the mall. So Park Police, MPD, and other agencies can push to focus more on some of the higher crime areas. I know various districts are offering teams of personnel that go over into the Anacostia, some of those areas. As a young officer, I walked Footbeat, Sheriff Road. I've been shot at on Sheriff Road. And when I hear back from some of the officers, the community in some of these neighborhoods do appreciate it. So it's not everyone that's coming out against it. There are people in the community that appreciate it. But it is a force multiplier for the department, and you're seeing some results. You're seeing carjacking down significantly. You had 497 in 2024, down 87%, I think, when they last talked about it. So you're seeing significant reductions in crime. The big thing is, how do we carry this forward in a proper fashion?
Councilmember Allen, I'd like to turn it to you next, particularly given your unique perspective, having served as the chair of the Public Safety Committee and currently still serving on that committee, to share your reflections both to the broader question and also to kind of the comments shared by Stephen.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and thanks again for having this conversation. I'll echo what Chief Sun said about creating dialogue and discussion is really crucial, and so I appreciate the format and pulling everyone together here. I will obviously take a little bit of a different approach, and one of the things that I talked about when this first took place was that this wasn't about public safety in the district, this was about power and control. Over the last couple of years, actually in great partnership with the mayor, with the council, with our police department, with our chief, and with community in particular, we've actually made a lot of progress on public safety, and we have been driving down violent crime and improving public safety in our city, and we want that to continue. It does not require, however, the president invoking an emergency that isn't backed up by the facts and putting armed National Guard members all over the place and bringing in federal agents. When I think about DC law, the work that we've done with our police department, for example, every DC police officer that you're going to encounter has a body-worn camera that they're wearing. That helps with transparency. They've got their name on their uniform. They don't cover their face. We create actually really great transparency and accountability with our local law enforcement. The federal agents that you're seeing that are completely masked, they don't show their names, a car will pull up and 4 masked agents will hop out, and some people don't even know if they're police officers or not, and they just take somebody away. I'm hearing from our police officers that are actually doing the hard work in community that the trust that they've worked so hard to build over the last several years is getting hugely undermined. I'm seeing officers that are demoralized, that are feeling like they are just taking a back seat, and that the hard work they really put in over the last several years is really being undermined by what's happening. And the reason why I also said this is about power and control is not only because we were working so hard to move things in the right direction, but we said very early, the only reason this is happening in DC is because it can. DC is uniquely situated. But very quickly, the president said, I'm going to Chicago, I'm going to New Orleans, I'm going to Baltimore. So they weren't even hiding it. And if there's one thing we've learned, when this president says it, you should believe it. And so we now see federal agents moving into Chicago. We're seeing the threats against other cities across America. It is un-American to have armed military members all over our city. Today alone, which is our 30th day of this emergency, I passed 12 armed National Guard officers just in the course of my movements around the city. Usually they're just hanging together, talking to each other. They're bored out of their minds. It doesn't honor, frankly, their uniform and their service. My dad was in the Guard. They train for a real job, for a hard job. And I've talked with multiple members of our National Guard that are deployed here. What they're doing to them really, I think, frankly, is actually dishonoring the volunteer service they have, the uniform they wear, and the training they have, which is to be able to respond to true and real emergencies where they're needed, and that's not happening here. So I think that where we have to go is the continued hard work. We do partner with federal agencies, absolutely. We work with the ATF and FBI. There's a really strong partnership that has existed for a very long time. But what we've seen with masked agents just disappearing some neighbors, targeting people because of the way they look or what they're driving, that's not right. And I think that it's actually done severe damage to the trust we need with our police department. I think it's hurt a lot of our communities. It's absolutely wrecked our local economy right now. And I think it's been very dangerous. And I think tomorrow, after the 30 days pass, you're not going to see a whole lot different than you saw today.
Thank you. Kay, I actually want to turn it to you because there's a couple of different themes that have come up here that I think you're well positioned to talk about. And so on one end, we heard about an issue of home rule in the district, right? And like that being one of the distinctions, you know, that make DC a little bit different than other communities. We've heard on one end considerations of crime actually being down, and then on the other end considerations of what this means for the National Guard troops, but also really what this means for the community. And so leading Free DC and all of your community work that you've done, what is your take and what is the real sentiment on the ground from the communities that you are working closely with?
Yeah, I mean, as Charles just said, this is extremely harmful to our communities. And what we're hearing is that people don't want it. Nobody asked for it. And I would take it a step further. It's not just because he can do it that Donald Trump and Stephen Miller are doing this. It is because they want to silence dissent in the Capitol so that they can make an authoritarian power grab and prevent a transfer of power. They tried to prevent a transfer of power on January 6th. They didn't succeed. They're trying to lay the groundwork now so they will prevent a transfer of power next time. And what you're seeing, the way it's playing out, is illegal in so many ways. You're seeing illegal checkpoints, right? You're seeing the return of stop and frisk. You're seeing these gangs of federal agents, bringing people in ways that are clear violations of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. So we have colleagues from Harry's Wildest Dreams who sit in court sometimes until 1 a.m. because now there's hundreds of people getting arrested instead of dozens, right? And what they're seeing is the judge saying over and over, this is illegal, this is illegal, this is a violation of the Constitution. And there's nothing that the judge can do about it. So this is just an attack on black men, on brown men, on young people who are 14 to 18, on houseless people, and on immigrants. And in the immigrant community, what we're seeing is people not only being whisked into these vans, but taken out of DC, taken to Virginia, and sometimes very quickly taken much further away, and family members don't know where they are. When you take somebody, when an unmasked gang of people take somebody and they have no labeling and there is no due process, that is called kidnapping. They are kidnapping our neighbors and then trying to tell us that this is good for us and that we should feel safe because they are arbitrarily kidnapping neighbors of ours. It is absurd. The other thing that we are seeing, though, is that the people of DC will not take it. We trained more than 5,000 people before the occupation because during the campaign trail, Donald Trump said over and over again he was going to take over D.C. That's not something he just decided to do because his 19-year-old employee who is in charge of mass layoffs suddenly got beat up by somebody. It has nothing to do with that. That was all pretext. Every step of the way in the campaign trail, he said he was going to take over the Capitol. That's why we were able to prepare. We trained thousands of people, and what we see is that people generally understand what to do. People are directing traffic away from ICE checkpoints. They are chasing ICE out of neighborhoods. We saw a grand jury refuse to indict somebody for throwing a sandwich at these, again, unmarked, masked agents that are attacking our neighborhoods. And so I think the people of DC are pretty clear. This is harmful. We do not want it. It should end. And it is a dictator move. That is what's going on. This is straight out of the authoritarian playbook. And we are experiencing it here because the Capitol is an important place to silence dissent if you intend to stop a transfer of power.
Jamel. You write a lot about politics, history. Let's kind of take us on this thread of what Kea has mentioned of whether this is a authoritarian regime, whether this is a transfer of power from that perspective around history and politics. What's your take on that?
I'm inclined very much to agree. One way to look at this is if a presidential administration were serious about helping cities around the country deal with violent crime, there are things that that administration can do from the level of executive agencies and from the executive branch. You can, again, leverage partnerships with ATF, with the FBI, with the DEA to work more closely with cities around the country. You could go to Congress and request funding for more police officers, for more resources to be able to target those areas where violent crime is most prevalent. Like, there are constructive things one can do if one is genuinely interested, I think, in reducing crime. You can work with cities that have had success in drastically reducing their violent crime rates and see what lessons you can draw from that and bring them to other places. But the administration not only has not done any of that, right, has shown no interest in doing any of that, has demonized cities like Baltimore, for example, that have made great strides in recent years in reducing its violent crime rate. Not only has it not done any of that, but the president seems to be wielding the possibility of a federal incursion of National Guard troops as basically a threat, not against cities and areas, localities that have high crime rates, but against his political rivals. It seems to me quite obvious and quite intentional to use this as a way to threaten them, to say that if you continue your opposition, we're going to put soldiers in Chicago, Governor Pritzker and Mayor Johnson. We're going to put soldiers in Baltimore, Governor Moore, right? So I think, like, I do view the crime here as basically being a pretext for the use of American soldiers to threaten political rivals, to exercise force, to create kind of at least the image and pageantry of authoritarianism. There's something about all of this that feels like a lot of edifice to me. You know, commenting on the National Guard soldiers kind of standing around looking bored. Like, we've all seen them just kind of hanging out. Last time I was in town last week, I saw 3 guys just like, drinking a fruit drink or something, just like chilling. But and so they're not doing anything, but I think that the president likes the image of them. He likes the idea of having soldiers on the street. And that, to me, if nothing else, is revealing of just an authoritarian mindset. Even if it isn't translating to what you might imagine in a movie, I think the president's mindset is there. And the last thing I'll say is I do want to emphasize this point about how damaging this is to the soldiers themselves. My parents served in the Navy for several decades. My brother is a Navy reservist. I grew up in a military town. I have lots of friends in the military and the Guard. They don't train for this. This is not their job. And one of the great successes of the United States is in having this firm and rarely if ever breached line between politics and the military, right? The military does not get involved in the politics of the nation. And the president deciding to leverage the military for politics sets a genuinely dangerous precedent that we've seen how this plays out in other countries, and it does not play out well.
Chief Sun, I want to turn it back to you. And so we've heard crime as a pretext. We've heard that there are other things that the federal government, but also maybe even the police department could be doing to continue to drive crime rates down that are not necessarily a takeover. We've also heard kind of alluding to the January 6th, right, insurrection as well. And so obviously you have experience that spans the breadth of that. And so I want to invite your comments and reflections on what the panelists have just shared.
Well, I think we've got a couple parts of that question. When you look at it, I think, Mayor Bowser, I think, has done a very good job in responding to this. And when you talk about what are the options or what's being offered to other cities, I think that one of the best things I'd say for any other city, regardless if it's St. Louis or if it's Tennessee, if it's Memphis, if it's whatever city it is that's having a crime problem, take a look at what's happening. Take a look at the teamwork that's been put together, the initiatives that's been done. Mayor Bowser's admitted that it's worked. It's driven down some of the crime. It's resulted in some significant arrests of some very violent individuals, and do the same in some of these other cities. Look at the model that's been developed and carry it over. Like Mr. Allen had pointed out, we've done this before. This is the time, rather than saying, hey, I'm just going to pump the brakes and I'm not going to accept or ask for any help. If we're having problems, and I'll tell you, you look at the Labor Day violence over in Chicago, or even just last weekend, 18 shootings, 5 dead, that's a lot for even a city that size. I think anything you can do to reduce the violence, the people that are victimized the most would appreciate it. So I think look at kind of the model that's been developed and take that elsewhere.
So I have one question before we open it up to questions from the students. I encourage you all to get your questions ready, and also feel free to line up at either of the mics, and we will open up for Q&A in just a moment. And this question is for all of the panelists or anyone who wants to share. And so there's clearly been lots of different issues that have been raised here, and obviously there's a focus on, crime, whether we believe it's a pretext or a real reason for what's been happening. There's also a focus on homelessness. There's been clear talks around immigration and the impacts it's having on different communities within the city. And so given all of the potential issues that are at stake here, in addition to what was being said around authoritarianisms and more of the political regimes that are happening, what are the solutions for the local community and other communities across the country when thinking about all of these diverse issues and how to deal with them, if not this? Anyone can jump in.
I'll begin to, sorry, Mr. Allen.
Well, when you say this, what do you mean?
If not the takeover. And so what is the solution?
Well, this is why using public safety as a pretext is so effective. If I ask every single person in this room, do you want to live in a safe neighborhood? You'll say yes. So the politics of public safety are very effective. And that's exactly why you see it be used. Because the moment you argue against federal agents or the National Guard, so you're for a dangerous community, you don't want a safe community, it's a false choice that gets thrown in front of you. And when we look back, and I'm sitting next to an esteemed historian, when you when we look at the history books of authoritarian regimes, it's not like on Monday everything was normal, and then on Tuesday all of a sudden there's Nazi flags hanging everywhere. It is a slow boil, and we are frogs in the pot. There are 1,000 steps that happen on the way to that conclusion. And so it is all a pretext being used, because every single person in this room, I believe to my core, wants to live in a community that is safe. How we define safety might be a little bit different based on who I'm talking to, but every single person wants safety. And when we live in a city that for the last several years has continuously, after a national peak in 2023 of violent crime, has worked hard collaboratively to drive crime down and improve public safety in communities, that work has to continue. And it is best led with local leadership, accountable leadership. So you want your mayor, your council, your police chief, you want your local leaders to make those decisions, because you, the voters, get to help hold us accountable. If we're headed the wrong direction, you got us at the ballot box. We have to come and be accountable in front of you. That's not what we see take place right here because of the unique position of the district. But to Kea's point, I'll just share one quick story from this weekend. So I have a 9-year-old son. He's on a Little League baseball team. So Saturday, we're out at the fields, for folks that know where that is, near RFK, got a Little League game. So all of a sudden, I hear some of the kids in the outfield, I'm standing over at first base, start yelling, "I see some military, I see some military." Then they start yelling, and I hear the panic in their voice, "He's got a gun, he's got a gun, he's got a gun." And I turn around, and it's 6 National Guard officers with long rifles walking by a kid's Little League game. And every adult had to focus on the Little League game. We had to normalize that moment for the kids and be like, "Hey guys, batter's up, let's focus on that." And we just normalized the fact that there are armed military members just walking through our community. And that is part of the goal, to normalize the fact that when you walk through Union Station, there's a dozen National Guard just standing around, to normalize all these pieces. And that is why it is so dangerous. So when we ask, what are we doing about this? This is the hard work that we all do collectively, locally, with local and accountable leadership to build safe communities and continue that work. And I would argue that's what we've been doing for the last several years, collaboratively, across government, with law enforcement, and with community in particular. And the danger of this moment is the break that is happening between the community that you need and all those other actors and players. You can see it happening in communities all over the city right now. And when they say they want to go to Chicago and to Baltimore and to Memphis and to New Orleans, you know it's going to play out and break in many other places, and it will have dangerous, and I would argue deadly consequences.
I want to build on that, because I think the point there about the importance of accountability and democracy is critical, right? If it were the case that Brandon Johnson, mayor of Chicago, puts in a request with the White House, right? We are having a serious problem with violent crime, and we really need help, and we think it'd be beneficial if the president could work with the governor to provide National Guard in Chicago. That's one thing, right? You can debate that. The people of Chicago can debate that. They can come to a decision, and if the people of Chicago come to the decision that this is what they want to do, more power to them, and that's one thing. I think it's the imposition of these things on communities that is the issue. And you know, no one talks about the Third Amendment to the Constitution anymore. No quartering soldiers, right? It's like the forgotten amendment. But that amendment there represents the founding generation, the revolutionary generation's deep suspicion and fear and discomfort with standing armies, and with the ability of standing armies to be used to impose things on people that they don't want. And I think we should understand this imposition and the threats of further impositions in that context. Not so much a context of public safety, but a context of what is democratically legitimate. That's the coin of the realm in this country. We're a self-governing people. We're a democracy, a republic, whatever you want to call it. And first and foremost, there has to be some recognition of popular legitimacy. And that popular legitimacy is not simply someone got elected president. We have levels of government because we have levels of popular legitimacy. And if a community has said, or does not get any say, does not get any chance to voice their view, of the use of an extraordinary measure like the National Guard, I think the proper approach should be to look at that very skeptically and very even hostilely, and not to grant the presumption of good faith.
I was going to talk about mental health for a little bit, but how do you handle when you have members of a community, like you see at some of the mayors' meetings in Chicago, where they're coming out and they're asking for help. They're talking about how victimized they are in their neighborhoods, and they're asking for help, and they're not getting any support from the mayor or the governor of Illinois. How do you handle that?
I mean, as a local leader, when I have members of my community that ask for help, and that happens all the time, that help is best delivered locally by the accountable people who have the job and the responsibility to do it. When it is imposed upon you, it's not like anybody in DC said, would really love the National Guard to come in. Could you please deploy that? South Dakota, could you please send us some National Guard members? That is an imposition, and it is an occupation. It is sending people here that we didn't ask for. This also is, again, why I think public safety is such an effective tool and wedge frequently, because we do want to work on public safety, and local leaders should be accountable for improving public safety and constantly working on that in their communities. And to the person who says, I don't feel safe in my community, as an elected leader, I have to legitimize what they are saying. As an elected leader, if I delegitimize that this individual does not feel safe in their community, I am not doing my job, and I will feel that because there is accountability to that. So when I have residents who say, I don't feel safe, that my answer is not to bring in the National Guard or let me bring in ICE agents to go tackle a moped driver. It is to say, how do I solve that problem? How do I bring community together to solve that problem? How do I bring MPD into that? How do I bring all my different tools to fix that? But it is best led and best served when that is local accountable leadership, not being imposed upon us.
And if there are federal actions taken, I'm just going to put some out there, right? Maybe Trump and Miller could not enact mass firings that destroy the family fabric, so that sometimes there's breadwinners that were supporting 3 families that don't have a job right now. 300,000 black women lost their jobs between April and today. Think about the scale of what has happened to our community. So if you want to make our community safe, reverse the mass firings. Don't cut Medicaid. Don't cut SNAP. Don't make people hungry, right? Like every single thing that this regime has done has made us unsafe every step of the way. And I think that that's important for us to understand the underpinnings of public safety. The underpinnings of public safety are a whole community, a community that is made whole, because it is really tragic and traumatic when someone experiences a lack of safety. It's horrible. How do we bring safety to our communities? Look at the communities that are most safe. What do they have? They have jobs. They have health care. They have food. They have parks. It's beautiful in those places. And we know that everything that this regime has done has taken that away from the people of DC, like methodically taken that away from the people of DC. And so this whole thing is preposterous, like just even presenting the question as though it's a serious question is preposterous. Like what we're seeing is that DC is extremely vulnerable because of a legacy of slavery that gives us only limited home rule instead of the protection of statehood. So we don't control the National Guard for that reason. We don't get to decide who prosecutes our local crimes for that reason. We don't get to vote in the body that today tried to pass 14 laws that would attack DC. Like all of this stuff is a direct line legacy from slavery that is the reason we don't have the protections of statehood. So if we want to, I'm going to redefine this to be a free DC. If we want to have a free DC, we know what we need to do because we know what every country has done to get out of a situation like this. We have used our power as people, our power as jurors, our power as consumers, our power as taxpayers. We get trained, we get organized, we act together, and this will end, and we will end it, but it will not be because they have any solutions to offer us. It will be because we know how to keep each other safe, and we know how to turn this around for ourselves in our community.
All right, so I'd like to open it up for Q&A from the students. Feel free to line up at the mics if you have some. And give us your name and where you're coming from, what major or school, and then we'll get started.
Good afternoon. I want to start by saying thank you so much for having this conversation in front of all of us. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think it's really great that we have the opportunity to listen and talk about these issues that are so pertinent in our modern day political and social climate. My name is Shlok. I live on the Hilltop campus. I'm a sophomore graduating a year early, studying public policy. So in a year, I'll be studying on this campus as well. I'm taking some classes here as well. Sorry, I'm just thinking of how to phrase this. There's a lot going on right now, and I think I myself personally am very feel a need to stand in solidarity and empower the voices that are being pushed down and trying to be pushed out in the current DC climate. And I really want to, because I feel that's the right place to be and that's the right thing to do, especially with protests and marches and demonstrations, whether on campus or off campus. But I come from an immigrant family. I am an immigrant myself, and I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that I'm kind of scared. It's very real, and it's something that I haven't really experienced because, honestly speaking, I've lived kind of a privileged life in a bit of a bubble. I come from New Jersey originally, a nice town, not a lot of police, nothing super, nothing really in my face like that. And so my question to you all is, how can I, and anyone else that may have the same question as me, how can we stand in solidarity while maintaining our livelihoods and feeling security and being able to, if our parents call, tell them honestly that, yes, we're safe?
I'm going to direct that first maybe to Kea, and then we'll see if other people have thoughts that they'd like to share, and then we'll go to another question from this side of the room.
Well, you heard from Scout and Emily at the very beginning. There is a student group you can plug into that's related to Free DC. We have lots of trainings, and I think the most important thing that people can do in this moment is get trained. Because whether you like it or not, this is not something you can hide from. So it used to be that if you would only need to get trained in certain skills if you were a really dedicated activist. That's how I ended up getting trained in a lot of this stuff. I was a very dedicated activist. And so I knew a lot of these things that we're now training people in, just how to stay calm when the police are running at you, how these very simple things we teach people, when you're talking to a police officer, sometimes you can de-escalate by simply taking a step away from their weapon. Some of these are very simple things. Some of them are more complicated things, which is why there's a lot of training. And so we have an orientation, we offer a longer 4-hour training. There's a student group you can plug into where students can get a mass of people together and then get trained. But it is really important that students know your rights, that you understand the political context of where we are, and also I want to say the really critical and important role of students in every movement to take down dictatorships. It is really important to understand that has actually been a source of joy and a source of fun for generations of students all over the world. And we tell people 5 things. Number 1, don't obey in advance. Number 2 is actually prioritize joy. And so it is really, really important that people lean into that, right? Hang out together, outside, go to museums together, sing, dance, listen to go-go music. You're in the home of go-go music. This is how we get through this moment, is by actually building community, getting information, getting trained, and experiencing joy together, because oppressed people over time have always used song, prayer, dance, and we're gonna have to use it too, and that's gonna make it fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll take a question from this side.
Thank you very much for your time. My name is Michael. I'm with the Masters in Policy Management. My question specifically concerns past uses of the National Guard from a federal perspective in response to national emergencies. Specifically, national emergencies have been invoked numerous times to utilize the National Guard for controversial events, specifically things like Kent State or Little Rock, Arkansas. So in cases with the civil rights movement, those was similar in the fact that the local communities fiercely opposed the intervention of the federal government wielding their power, but the National Guard came in to forcibly integrate different communities to advance civil rights. In those cases, we deem it as very good because there's a positive outcome. They were protecting the rights of minorities through federal power. The current administration is arguing that right now they're protecting the rights of law-abiding citizens against both violent criminals or illegal residents who are occupying the country against our national laws. How is this case different to where there are arguments against the use of federal power to protect the rights of citizens now versus in past examples vis-a-vis the civil rights movement where we use federal power to protect the rights of minorities?
Jamel or Chief Sun? Do I?
I think one of the key distinction is that in the case of Arkansas in 1957 or in Alabama in 1963, what you have are the authorities of a state, the governors of the state, directly defying a Supreme Court order, right? Directly defying what is the law of the land, and refusing to obey federal law, refusing to obey the Constitution. So in those circumstances, it made total sense to invoke the National Guard to carry out the law of the land that the authorities of both states were simply refusing to obey. That's not the circumstance in DC, right? There was no Supreme Court order that the DC was rejecting, refusing to obey. There were no laws that DC authorities were refusing to honor. This was a determination by the administration that there was a crime emergency, kind of vaguely defined, that therefore demanded the use of the National Guard. I think those are very different circumstances. Kent State, even that's a bit of a different circumstance. First, it wasn't the federal government, it was the state of Ohio calling in the National Guard. So the governor does have that authority, right, and dealing what was perceived to be disorder. But it's worth saying, right, that what happens at Kent State is because you have these Guard soldiers who were not trained for handling domestic disturbances, who were not trained for that kind of situation, there was a tragic result. 4 people were shot and killed. The closest thing to, I would say, like anything like an analogy is after the LA riots, when the governor of California did request that the Bush administration federalize the National Guard, request that kind of support. And again, that's a different situation. When the lawful authority of a state requests federal intervention, that's fine. I may disagree with the choice, right, depending on the circumstances, but that doesn't raise any hackles. That's the orderly operation of things. And the 57 and 63 circumstances, again, post Reconstruction, the federal government does have this authority to kind of force states to comply with the Constitution, but we don't have any of that here. And I think that's the key distinction.
Thank you very much.
Take a question from this side. Thank you so much, Kaya, for joining us.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Will, a Master of Public Policy student on this campus. Basically, what I would argue what we've seen is federal intervention and local policing has played out very differently across cities. We have Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., I think is 2 very good examples we have in the current political climate. In Washington, D.C., I would argue we've seen a more institutional or symbolic pushback to federal control of policing, or just the action of federal forces being within the city, while in Los Angeles and expectations in Chicago, we'll see a more confrontational protests. What do you think explains these different types of resistance? And then what do you think it says about how these communities within these cities understand where we currently stand politically, economically, and socially in our current environment?
Charles?
I actually don't think you see in DC a population that is not resisting. I think about just this Saturday, where thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people gathered and rallied and marched. If there's a distinction I might draw between LA and DC, when we look at the heart of where people that would otherwise be in the streets marching, we do have a lot of families that have been impacted with mass firings from the federal government and from threats of that. You can read in the news today the lawsuit from FBI folks that said they had to take a loyalty test and get asked how they voted, and because they had voted wrong, apparently, in the eyes of the FBI director in the past, they lost their jobs. I know when I talk to several constituents who have mortgages to pay, food to put on the table, they are nervous about being able to go out into the streets and protest because we have watched this administration say, did you in 2020 take a knee at any point? You're fired. You've lost your job. You're blackballed from everything that we can do. And we're talking about people's livelihoods, their careers that they have spent a very long time. So I do think there is an element, very intentional element, of fear that probably plays out in DC differently than you might see in other cities because of just the nature of the federal government and so much of a workforce here. But I don't think that should be mistaken for a community that really pushes back. Look how many, just watch any video you can find when ICE agents show up. Neighbors flood out the door, cameras rolling, arguing, shaming. This is in my own neighborhood. I mean, we had guys just trying to deliver a meal, and folks run out and they start talking, and an immigration attorney happened to live in the neighborhood and gets his name, then contacts his wife to make sure that she knows. Like, those are acts of defiance, those are acts of resistance, and it just may look a little different than that direct confrontation on the line with riot shields that you saw in LA. But make no mistake, there is defiance, there is resistance. It just might look a little different in DC.
If I could just really quick, I'd chime in. There has been assaults on some of the military personnel. But talking with some of the federal agents that have been out there, they'll tell me 85% of the citizens that come out are extremely appreciative and supportive of them being out here, and approximately 10 to 15% will be very argumentative. I'm not talking about the sandwich thrower, and that officer was in full uniform. He was a CBP officer. But most of the other ones, the military, there's been at least a couple of assaults, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 assaults on some of the military personnel. So just to let you know that has happened.
A question over here, yeah?
Hi, thanks so much. Great panel. My name is Karen Hughes. I'm a graduate student in the Policy Management Program. I'm also an ANC commissioner in Ward 6, so hi, Charles. I see a lot of really interesting, dynamic local leadership happening. I wanted to thank Kea for giving the people of DC something to do, something to feel more empowered in a situation that feels pretty disempowering. I think a lot of us are wondering what's happening with the Democratic Party overall, and I'm wondering if anyone would care to share perspectives on the future of leadership in the Democratic Party, the policies that maybe will help to, anchor rhetoric going forwards, and where we might see some bravery. We're definitely seeing that out of Governor Pritzker in Illinois. It's sort of an open question that I'm not sure anyone has the answer to, but perhaps you have some perspectives.
I like that you brought the easy question. I'll take a quick crack at that. Obviously, I'm an elected official who is part of a political party as a Democrat. So I guess I'll just frame it from my perspective. I can't obviously speak for a Democratic Party or for anybody else. I do think it is important, and I think I hear from residents, from voters, that they want to hear their leaders speak with clarity about what they see in this moment and what they believe. Make no mistake, for the district, it's complicated. It's hard, right? Unlike anywhere else in the country, I think we probably have the hardest path to take. I think that if we are being fair, you are going to see Democratic leaders take different paths. They may actually still genuinely have the same outcome in mind, but they may take strategic decisions or tactical decisions that are different and look different from one another, but they actually still have the same goal in mind. And there should be a healthy debate among those leaders, as well as hearing from the people that they serve about, do they think they're on the right tactic or they think they're on the right strategy? But I'm going to try my best to believe that people have the same end goal in mind. But I really believe, and I feel when I talk to my residents, my neighbors, when I'm just walking down the sidewalk getting stopped by people nonstop, they appreciate and they want to see their leaders speak with clarity. They want to hear in this kind of moral moment, what do you stand for? What do you believe in? What are you willing to do? And I think that's an important part that every leader, regardless of your political affiliation, should owe the residents and the constituents they serve.
Jamel, do you want to chime in before we go to the next question?
Sure. I mean, what's up with the Democratic Party?
Title of your new article?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I have two thoughts. I think first it's important to, and this was alluded to in the question, right? That there's congressional leadership, there's leadership across states, there's local leadership, and people are doing different things and taking different approaches, right? So you have, Governor Newsom and Governor Pritzker, even Governor Hochul, sort of like being a bit more leading and voicing that opposition, kind of performing to voters and constituents the kind of dismay and anger they feel, which is, I think, a very important part of elected leadership. In Congress, you have, I do think a set of Democratic leaders who, the job they signed up for was leading a legislative coalition, not necessarily being some kind of voice of opposition. And I do think that the congressional leadership has really struggled with trying to reflect back at voters and constituents the kind of anger they feel, the kind of outrage they feel. I think that the thing about our system is that there isn't a singular party leader. Like in the UK, there's a shadow PM, right? There's a person who is a designated leader of the party. We don't have that. So I think what we're going to see for the next couple of years is exactly more of this. Depending on where they exist in the political system, different Democratic leaders behaving in different ways. But I do suspect that you're going to see convergence, at least among the most ambitious people, towards this. The public that is angry and upset wants to see people reflect that back at them, wants to see people who understand that and can speak to it, and can speak to it in their own ways. Sometimes it's going to be fiery, sometimes it's not going to be, but however it is, it's going to be some attempt to speak to these very real, moral concerns. I think one legitimate issue the entire Democratic Party has is they imagine voters to be exclusively concerned with what's in their pocketbook, as if we're all kind of just robots. But people's sense of what matters to them is quite broad. And it may not hurt your pocketbook to see, soldiers stationed in American City, but it may make you feel some kind of way. And you want your leaders to speak to how it makes you feel some kind of way.
All right, we have time for about one more question, and so we will go to this side of the room. Yeah.
No pressure. Sorry, I'm not that tall. I'm gonna just project, I guess. Okay, Monday around noon, I was walking on 16th and Irving, heading towards Columbia Heights Metro, and I encountered a homeless man that I know from the area, on his back, unresponsive, eyes half open, breathing. I've lived here for over 4 years now, and that is not the first time I have been with someone that's experiencing a health crisis, and I have never hesitated in the past to call 911 and get medical help. This is the first time I stopped and I was like, well, if I call, are police going to show up as well? Or will federal officers then follow up after this person receives medical help to say, you need to either go to a shelter or get mental health help, or you will be arrested or get fines. I am not sure, and I want to know how I am supposed to act as a DC resident to help. We have 60 beds available right now in DC and about 1,000 unhoused people, yet homelessness seems to be being made a crime as if it already wasn't moving towards that way in DC. So what should we do as DC residents when we come across people that need this medical help or other types of support when we're afraid to have any sort of reporting on them? Yeah.
I'll take a first crack at that. What I mentioned earlier, I have many fears of what's going on right now. One of them is what you just described, what took place. I am watching folks that they have for years partnered with our local police department on back to school backpack events and community barbecues and all kinds of community building and community trust type of events. And I'm watching them get stopped in a checkpoint, and they are afraid now to call for help or to go back and trust the very person they worked with for years. I was talking with a police officer who came out and joined a community bike ride the other day. And he was actually really grateful that he has not been put on any of these task forces. And he was like, everything I've done for the last several years is out the window now. Like, I have tried so hard to build these community relationships and they're gone. So when I talk about some of the lasting damage of these 30 days, it is what the hesitation you had to call 911, which would be the reasonable thing to do, right? And that is playing out over and over and over and over again in our communities, and it's serious damage. When I talk with MPD leadership, they are deeply concerned about it as well. We do have in DC a 24-hour crisis hotline that is not MPD. I have that on, I can pull out my phone and give you the number if you want. It is a number I actually use all the time, and they will reach out if it is a dangerous situation. They bring in MPD for that, which is the appropriate step to take. But they also have a team of folks who are mental health professionals, behavioral health specialists, substance use specialists who go out and do that first touch. But that is a resource that we push hard. I think we probably need to do a lot better of helping arm people with that information, because if there's a hesitancy to call 911, which is supposed to be there when you need help, or when you see someone in crisis, then we need to do a better job on that. And again, I think it's going to be lasting damage to that community trust that is so crucial, I think, frankly, to the gains we've made over the last couple of years. And it's really going to sever and break that, and we are all going to suffer the consequences of that. And it's going to play out in cities all across the country.
Jamel and Chief Sun, I want to give you an opportunity to share any final thoughts you have, both in reflection of the last 30 days, but also kind of where you think maybe we're heading for the foreseeable future.
I would just, I think there's been a lot of really good questions. I appreciate the questions. I just urge everybody to, a lot of you are students, do critical thinking, like we talked about when I first came in, we were talking. Discuss, these issues. I would say stop and talk to some of your local law enforcement. Get to know them. If you haven't ridden along with MPD, I think they're still doing ride-alongs. Take the opportunity to ride along. We don't become cops because we want to control the society. We become cops because we want to help people. They're an important part of your society. Get to know them. They're human beings. They're good people. And some of the other people that you'll see out there, don't be fearful to go up and talk to some of these people. Get to see what they're dealing with, the real life stuff they deal with. They're there to try and help you. Trust me. Get to know them. Don't, buy into a lot of fear concerns. Do your homework, do your critical thinking, and then make a decision.
Do I have any concluding? I'm actually very bad at concluding remarks. I'm like, I suppose I want to reiterate. I'm going to reiterate a point I made earlier about the importance of respecting local democracy and respecting people's right to be able to say no. That's what I find the most disturbing about this. I think people have a right to say no, and people of DC are not being given a chance. I think it's interesting that the president has, threatened to use the Guard in other places, and those places where legally he has to have the permission of the governor, and they've said no, and he keeps talking about it, but it's not clear he's actually going to go through with it. So that to me is a sign of both intent, but also the importance of having political leaders that are going to stand up for you. On a more concrete level, I'm in agreement with, I think, everyone on this stage that public safety is so important. I live in Charlottesville, which is very idyllic, but we have we have our problems there as well. I think the image is idyllic, but there are a lot of issues, and constructive relationships among police officers and community members and other parts of the public safety infrastructure have been kind of integral to helping address those issues. And the thing that I do find genuinely so worrisome about this use of federal force is that it does damage those relationships between law enforcement and public safety and the community. Like those, you cannot have a safe community, reduce crime if you don't have community buy-in. And if you are abusing National Guard, if you're abusing federal agents for the sake of whatever narrow political goals you have, you are leaving those communities worse off in so many ways. And I think I'm afraid that DC is going to experience that over the next several years. As someone who used to live here and who loves the city.
Thank you all. I will say, one of the reasons both the Institute of Politics and Public Service and the Evidence for Justice Lab partnered up on this event is because it really gets at the heart of what both of our organizations care a lot about, right? Justice on one end and politics and the intersection of the two of them. And so while I hope and wish we could have come away with lots of solutions and ideas for what's to come, I think what's most important is that we're having timely conversations that are happening when things are happening in our community right now that are of concern to everyone, regardless of where we stand or the ideas that we have about it. And so with that, I just want to thank all of our panelists for coming and sharing their time, their thoughts with our community. And I want to thank you all for engaging and listening and asking questions to our panelists. With that, thank you so much.